The movie opens with Kanara wandering through an abandoned, decaying place where she sees a woman dancing. When Kanara asks who she is, the woman doesn't answer. She just keeps dancing eerily. As Kanara steps closer, the woman twists her neck around, terrifying her, and then a dark figure lunges at her, causing Kanara to wake up, but she realizes it was just a nightmare. She steps outside to fill her water bottle, when suddenly she hears the creaking sound of a door opening. But when she turns around, there's no one there. Ignoring it, she continues filling the bottle, and that's when her friend Ayu appears from behind, surprising her with a cake and wishing her a happy birthday. Ayu says she knew Kanara purposely stayed back, and Kanara admits that if she had gone home, Raka would have shown up. Ayu says he cheated on her with her best friend, yet he still has no shame. She also says that the boarding house is very quiet this year. Earlier, she walked down the hallway and noticed several room lights were off. She asks Kanara if she wants to go home with her instead, adding that she should get to know her village, Kalawangan. Kanara replies that she thinks she's heard that name before, and Ayu explains that in the past, many dancers came from there, but now it's become extremely rare. Kanara says she's feeling sleepy and wants to rest, and Ayu tells her to come along with her tomorrow to buy some souvenirs. Later, she receives a text from Raka, asking how long she plans to stay away from him, but Kanara doesn't reply. She then searches for Kalawangan village online and finds an article stating that the village once produced many talented dancers. As she scrolls further, she comes across another article stating that it has been almost 10 years since Mayang Putrakandra, a young dancer, went missing.
Like, comment, subscribe to Recapss Horror.
The next day, at an antique shop, Kanara picks up a shawl, and an old woman tells her that the shawl is meant for her, saying the shawl chooses its own master. She tells her that whoever is chosen by the shawl will be bound to it forever, and then places a hairpin in her hair. As Kanara leaves, a mysterious woman appears in the mirror. Kanara tells Ayu that the shawl was given to her by the old woman at the antique shop, and she claimed it has chosen her as its master. She also shows her the hairpin, but Ayu says it's creepy and warns her not to just accept things from strangers. As they leave, we see that the shop is actually empty and available for rent. Later, Kanara decides to go with Ayu to her village, and before leaving, she places the shawl and the hairpin inside her wardrobe. When they arrive in the village that evening, it's raining heavily. Kanara suggests they take shelter and pulls her under a shed, but Ayu says it's just a little bit further, and they're already soaked anyway. Suddenly, Kanara hears music, but Ayu cuts her off and tells her to hurry up. They finally arrive at Ayu's house, where Ayu introduces her mother to Kanara, who happily welcomes her. Moments later, Ayu's father, Prastomo, also walks in, and Ayu introduces him to Kanara as well. But from his expression, it's clear that he isn't very pleased to see Kanara there. Once they're inside Ayu's room, Ayu apologizes for her father's strange behavior. Kanara asks if she didn't tell her parents she was bringing a friend, and Ayu replies that she told her mother, and she must have told her father, but she usually never brings friends home. Kanara asks if she's the first, and Ayu confirms it, saying none of her high school friends ever wanted to come here. Kanara then goes to take a bath, and meanwhile, Ayu's mother asks Prastomo what's wrong, to which he doesn't say anything, but the worry on his face is clearly visible. Kanara steps out after taking a bath when suddenly a door slams shut, and when she turns toward it, she sees a silhouette passing behind the door. Assuming it's Ayu, she calls out to her, but Prastomo suddenly tells her that it isn't Ayu's room. Later, Ayu tells her that she isn't allowed to date. Kanara says her dad might have a point, admitting she regrets ever dating in the first place. But Ayu replies that at least Kanara got to experience what it felt like to fall in love. Kanara says maybe her father forbids dating because he doesn't want her to be hurt. But before she can say more, she notices Ayu has already fallen asleep. Kanara reaches for her phone, but she finds that it's switched off. She gets up to take the charger from her bag, but freezes when she sees that shawl and that hairpin inside it. Her mind instantly recalls the old woman's warning. Whoever is chosen by the shawl will be bound forever. Uneasy, she sets them aside and turns to plug in her phone, but suddenly her foot skids across the wet floor, and she notices the rainwater dripping from a small hole in the ceiling. She goes to the kitchen to grab a bucket, and as she walks back toward the room, she notices a window standing slightly open. She closes it, but is startled to suddenly see Prastomo sitting there in the dark. She quickly composes herself and explains that she just went to get a bucket because Ayu's room is leaking. But when Prestomo doesn't respond at all, she walks away. Meanwhile, Prestomo is asleep in his room when a demonic voice whispers to him, "Until death separates you." He jolts awake in shock and quickly turns around, but there's no one there behind him. The next morning, Ayu takes Kanara to a dance studio, where she introduces her to the dance instructor, Sarti. Soon after, a man walks in, and Ayu introduces him as Dirja, the Saran player, and the one all the girls here admire. Later, she asks Kanara if she misses dancing, but Kanara just laughs it off. Ayu then teases her, saying that Dirja can't stop staring at her, and then tells Surti that Kanara used to be a dancer. Hearing that, the other students immediately get excited, and they drag her away to dance with them. Kanara apologizes, saying she hasn't danced in a long time and has forgotten most of it. But suddenly, she notices a woman standing far away, silently watching her. Noticing this, Surti immediately interrupts, telling the students to focus and get back to dancing. And when Kanara turns back to look again, the woman is gone. Meanwhile, Prestomo tells his wife that he has a feeling Banu has returned. She asks who the next victim might be, but he says he's still not convinced that Banu had anything to do with Mayang's death 10 years ago. She asks what he means, and Prestomo explains that Banu had no reason to hold a grudge against that girl. He then asks, "You knew Banu well, right?" And she silently nods. Later, Ayu tells Kanara that Dirja's uncle is an influential figure who helped the village grow. But she feels sorry for Dirja because his parents are dead, and his sister has been missing for years. Later that night, Kanara has the same nightmare again, and she sees the same woman, but this time, the woman's neck twists all the way around. Just then, an entity jumps in and lands on a pipe, and as Kanara runs in fear, the woman begins to dance. The creature crawls down and moves toward Kanara, who hides behind a wall, but the entity appears behind her, and she jolts awake. The entity whispers, "Come with me," and she gets out of bed screaming hysterically. Panicking, she tries to wake Ayu, but just then, the door of their room creaks open on its own. Kanara slowly starts moving outwards and hears someone singing a song in a female voice. Curious, she comes out of the room following the voice, and as she scans the area, we see a demonic entity there raising its hands. But when she turns around, there is no one there. She then suddenly hears a sound, and a figure passes behind her. She moves forward and realizes that the singing is coming from inside a room. She puts her ear to the door and then hesitantly tries to open it, but it is locked, and the singing stops. She turns to leave, but then the door suddenly opens, increasing her fear even more. She turns back and peeks inside the room, where she sees the same woman, but just then, Ayu calls out to her, and the door suddenly slams shut. The next morning, Kanara tells Ayu about the woman in her dreams and the black figure she saw. Ayu admits she isn't sure if it's related, but she shares a story she heard from others. She explains that the room in her house once belonged to her father's younger brother, Banu. Banu had a girlfriend named Rati, a dancer who also lived in the village. Banu died after being buried alive by the villagers. She also warns that every 10 years, a sacrifice, another dancer, is demanded. When she was little, one such victim went missing and has never been found. Kanara asks, Dirja's younger sister, and Ayu confirms. Later, Dirja tells them that Mayang once said, Rati is basically Banu's extension, seeking revenge. That's why, every 10 years, his uncle performs a hidden ritual to appease Banu's spirit. Ayu asks if that means Kanara should meet Uncle Addy to discuss it. But Kanara quickly insists she's fine, and there's no need. She's just confused about how this is related to her. Dirja warns her that for now, if Rati asks you to dance, don't do it. Fight her. That evening, Prestomo's wife serves him tea, but just as he brings the cup to his lips, he notices blood swirling. Trembling, he looks up and sees a demonic figure asking, "Where is the dancer?" His wife, however, sees no one. She snaps him out of it, and as she picks up the shattered cup, she asks what's wrong, but he just brushes it off, though he is still shaking. Meanwhile, Kanara hears the singing voice again, but this time it urges her to open, and the next moment, she finds herself in an unfamiliar room. Heart pounding, she scans the room and notices photographs of the dancer with Banu in the room, and an old, tattered book lying on a table. Curious, she opens the book and finds a folded paper inside. Unfolding it, she reads the chilling words, "Twin eclipse. Two souls, one love, one revenge. Narik Sukmo. Suddenly, a voice commands her to dance, and eerie music begins to play. And against her will, her hands and feet start moving as if an invisible force has taken control. She struggles, tries to stop, and cries out, begging for it to end, but no one is there to hear her. Then, she briefly breaks free from the possession, only for Rati to appear and command her to dance. Everyone rushes to Banu's room, pleading with Kanara to open the door. But inside, she is possessed, dancing eerily. Prestomo tries to force the door open while Rati hisses. What has been buried will rise. Kanara suddenly snaps out of it, screaming for help, but Rati seizes her again. And in a terrifying display, Kanara levitates in midair, and the door slams open, freezing Ayu and her parents in horror. She continues to dance above the ground eerily, before suddenly collapsing to the floor. Ayu asks Prestomo what's going on with their family, mentioning how her friend suddenly flew like that. He admits he doesn't understand either, but she accuses him of lying and storms off. She visits Dirja and says that if her uncle and Rati hold a grudge against the villagers, why is Kanara being affected? He asks what happened, but she explains that she wants to bring Kanara back to Jogja, as it's no longer safe here. Dirja asks how it isn't safe, and she replies that she doesn't want Kanara to share the same fate as Mayang. That same night, Ayu and Kanara set off for Jogja, but along the way, they are kidnapped by unknown people. The next morning, Kanara wakes up and is shocked to see Dirja there. He tries to calm her, but she immediately asks where Ayu is. Dirja says, Prestomo's men threw them out, so he brought her here. She calls him a liar and keeps asking where Ayu is, but he says he doesn't know. When Kanara asks how he knows Prestomo sent those men, to which Dirja says he's from this village, and there are two opposing groups here, Prestomo's group and his uncle's. He reveals that this room belonged to Mayang and asks Kanara to stay calm. Then he tells her that tonight, he'll take her to the bus terminal so she can go back to Jogja. It is then revealed that Dirja is working together with his uncle Adi, and Adi tells him that once Kanara wakes up, they must begin the ritual immediately. Adi then gets up and walks away, and in that same moment, Dirja notices the entity standing there. Meanwhile, Ayu asks his father if he has found Kanara, and he says not yet, but he has already asked many people to search for her. Suddenly, Ayu tells him to stay away, because she is seeing the demon in him. He tries to calm her, and Ayu finally snaps back to reality, gasping that she saw a black figure. Prestomo visits Banu's grave and asks if all of this is still about the grudge from 20 years ago. He begs Banu to let it go, to let him handle the revenge, but pleads that Ayu must not be harmed. And suddenly, a disembodied voice tells him to go home. Meanwhile, Adi tells his group that tonight they will perform the ritual because he has finally found the dancer. Later, Kanara hears the eerie music again, and suddenly the shawl starts wrapping itself around her leg. She then sees Rati standing right in front of her, whispering that the time has come. Rati begins moving her hands in a strange, ritualistic motion, and Kanara feels something being pulled out of her, like her very soul is being dragged away. Her body bends backward unnaturally, almost breaking. But just then, Dirjo enters the room, and Kanara snaps out of it. He asks if she's okay, but she is too terrified to even speak. He then shows her a photo album, and explains that Kelawangin was once prosperous, especially after Prestomo's and Banu's families came to the village. They often shared their harvest with the villagers, but one day, the villagers fell sick, and some even died. After an investigation, it was discovered that the crops given by them were the cause. Furious, the villagers dragged Banu to the fields. Adi tried to stop them, but they ignored him. They tied Banu to a cross, raised it in the middle of the field, pelted him with stones, and finally burned him alive. After that, Prestomo's family withdrew from the community, and strange occurrences began happening. Dirja says there's a supernatural force people believe to be Banu's spirit. Kanara then asks about Rati, to which he explains that after Banu's death, she disappeared. Some say she hanged herself, and Adi was devastated, because it's believed he was in love with Rati. Meanwhile, Ayu becomes possessed, and her parents panic when they see her condition. Prestomo urgently asks his wife for a glass of water, and begins reciting prayers over it. He places his hand on Ayu's forehead and commands Banu to leave her, and after a tense moment, Ayu suddenly snaps out of it and collapses. Prestomo goes to Banu's room and asks why this is happening, and how Banu could hurt Ayu. Suddenly, a book falls to the floor. He picks it up, opens it, and finds a folded piece of paper that reads, "Twin eclipse, 2 souls, 1 love, 1 revenge. Narik Sukmo," Rati whispers, dancer, before disappearing again. Meanwhile, Durja tells Kanara that his uncle is preparing a ritual to appease the spirits of Banu and Rasi, so they need to go to the dance studio immediately. Kanara asks where Ayu is, and Durja tells her that she is already waiting for her there. When Kanara arrives at the ritual site, she suddenly realizes everyone has disappeared, and to her shock, she sees Banu and Ratish there. Frozen in confusion, she watches as the two begin dancing. Kanara looks around, trying to comprehend what's happening, when she hears a noise and sees villagers dragging Banu toward her. While he keeps insisting he's innocent, the villagers then tie Banu to a cross, lift it upright, and start demanding that he be burned. Banu screams for help, but the mob pelts him with stones, and eventually, they set him on fire. Kanara suddenly snaps out of the vision, and to her horror, she sees Banu's burned body hanging there. Durja calls out her name, snapping her back to reality, and tells her, "Let's go." He brings her to Adi, who asks if she's ready. Confused, she asks, "Ready for what?" And Adi tells her she will lie down there. He then tells her to calm down and make her sit there. But right then, Prastomo arrives and shouts for Kanara to run. Kanara pushes Adi away and bolts from the ritual site, while Adi orders his men to capture her. Kanara hides behind a tree to escape them, but there she encounters the entity, making her scream in terror. She is taken back to the ritual site and tied up, while Adi begins the ritual. She cries for help, but Prastomo is also tied up. As Adi moves toward him, Prastomo calls him outrageous. He says he has stayed silent all these years, but he knew Adi was the one who slandered Banu and him. He tells everyone that Banu wasn't a bad man. He protected the villagers and cared for their children. He reveals that Adi poisoned the villagers, so Adi is the one who deserves to die. He then turns to Durja and asks how he could let this happen, how he allowed his own sister to die because of this cursed ritual. Adi tells him that's enough, but Prastomo spits in his face. Enraged, Adi says he will soon meet his brother, and then stabs Prastomo with a knife. They continue the ritual, and Adi offers the sacrifice in exchange for the protection of 1,000 lives. After a moment, Kanara hears a voice calling her to dance. Suddenly, the ropes binding her burn away on their own, and she begins to dance, possessed by Rati's spirit. Seeing this, Adi becomes terrified, and the villagers freeze in shock as they watch her performance. Adi tries to stop her, but Durja suddenly lunges at him, pushing him back, and a struggle breaks out. Adi overpowers him at first and throws him aside, but Durja doesn't give up. He grabs a torch and sets Adi on fire. Adi screams for help, but no one comes to his aid, and the crowd panics and runs away. Next, we see Banu thanking Kanara for helping them, and Rati tells her not to stop dancing. But just then, Durja shakes her and wakes her up. They quickly rush to check on Prastomo, who tells Kanara to take care of Ayu for him, and reassures her that there's nothing left for her to fear now. Kanara narrates that all this hatred was born because Adi secretly loved Rati. The villagers had the heart to publicly humiliate Banu. 20 years of resentment grew because Rati and Banu were separated, without ever having the chance to be together. Before leaving the village, Kanara throws the shawl into the river, and it's revealed that Sardi is actually Rati's mother. Meanwhile, on their way back, Kanara opens her bag to take out her phone, but to her shock, the shawl is inside her bag again, and the movie ends right there.